Let's talk about the good bit in Joe Biden's very expensive green climate plans for the US. I'm joined from Sweden by Bjorn Lomborg again. Good to talk to you again, Bjorn. I almost introduced you before as Bjorn Borg. What a compliment.
You did. Yes, it is a compliment. So thanks a lot. But yeah, no, I don't do tennis.
No. Well, I'll tell you what, though, when I read your piece this morning in The Australian, it didn't sound like you praising a multi-billion-dollar climate initiative. But what you like about Joe Biden's plan is the money he wants to pump into research and development, because technological development, you say, is the answer to emissions reduction.
It totally is. I think most people don't get the idea of the size of the challenge that we're really faced with. Remember, if everyone in the rich world stopped all of their CO2 emissions tomorrow and stayed shut down for the rest of the century, it would reduce temperatures by the end of the century by just 0.4 degrees. That's because the vast majority of emissions are going to come from China, India, Africa, Latin America, all the poor countries in this world. And they are not going to cut down their carbon emissions just to feel good. They can't afford that. They want to lift their populations out of poverty. That's why we're only going to solve this problem if we innovate clean, cheap, green energy that everyone will want to have instead of have to suffer in order to have. And that's where Biden's climate promise can actually come true. He's promising a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is not good.
Yeah, sure. A lot of it will be wasteful subsidies and the like. We understand that. But this subsidy idea for research and development, would that necessarily, to satisfy you and to be effective and efficient, would it need to also look at better use of nuclear energy, perhaps clean coal, or is it okay for all of the money to go into renewables?
Again, he's not very specific about what exactly is going to come out of this. He has suggested that he's open to nuclear. I don't know about clean coal. Also, I'm a little skeptical about clean coal. But in principle, we should be looking at all of these technologies, because we can't afford not to look at all the possible ways that potentially could solve global warming. Remember, right now, the world spends less than $20 billion every year on research and development into green energy. Biden is promising to increase that by $75 billion a year. That's a huge amount. That's a quadrupling. And that is exactly what Obama promised back in 2015 in Paris. Actually, this is more than what we promised. This is the kind of thing that also the Copenhagen Consensus has been arguing. This is the kind of thing that could really make the big difference.
I suppose this is what surprises me about it, because, of course, there's no greater nation in the history of the planet when it comes to invention, innovation, research and development than the US, and most of it's done by private enterprise, a lot in defence too, but even the defence investment is often through private enterprise. So why do you need this government subsidy of $75 billion a year? And do you expect that in the US, under Biden even, that would be channeled mainly through private companies doing the research and development?
Yeah, no, it's probably not going to be through private companies. But I think we need to recognize, if you look at most medical research, for instance, much of it is channeled through universities and foundations, where you do the first sort of the blue sky thinking, the actual things that then lay the tracks for private companies later to make this much cheaper and innovations that we can actually market. You should do the same thing with climate, because we're not, sort of 3 years away from solving the climate challenge. This is more like a 30-year challenge. And that's why you need blue sky thinking. You need all these initiatives that can start make a dent into the way that you can fix climate change. Sure, this could be cheaper solar and cheaper wind. It certainly should be on batteries, but it should also be, as you talked about, carbon capture. It should be on nuclear, both fission, but also fusion. It should be on a lot of different alternative ways, for instance, on storage, but also on hydrogen, on water splitting. There are many, many other ideas out there. One of my favorite is Craig Venter, the guy who cracked the human genome back in 2000. He's suggesting we should make these algae that you put out on the ocean surface and that produce oil, but because they produce them from sunlight and CO2, they would be CO2 neutral. Again, they're not competitive right now, but if we could make them competitive, that would be one of the ways that we could power the 21st century.
I'm certain there will be no shortage of applications for research grants from Joe Biden's $70 billion a year if he does indeed win the election in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks so much for joining us again, Bjorn. Appreciate it.
Thank you.